Leasiolagi. So can you please tell us a bit more about where you were on Independence Day back in 1962?
I remember the first Independence Day celebrations, and we had to march, and I tried very hard to sort of duck it, but and we were all told that we should be marching. So my recollections of that particular day was that we marched. It was pretty hot, and all the Samoan dignitaries were there, plus several representatives from governments outside, including, I vividly remember, people from the United Nations. And lots of speeches, and everybody congratulating themselves for work well done, and lots of prayers and lots of singing, and of course lots of dancing. And it was a very joyous occasion, as you can imagine. And with our two joint head of state at the time, our Prime Minister, all of whom, as you know, were holders of the paramount titles in the country. And everybody had a lot of respect for them. They certainly command a lot of authority at the time, and they kind of portrayed that during the day, during Independence Day.
So can you sort of describe the atmosphere on that day?
I think probably fair to say that the mood throughout the country was generally of celebration. And I remember that in 1961 there was a plebiscite to determine two questions. Whether Samoans want to have independence, and the second one was whether they would like to have independence based on the constitution which existed at the time. Both questions of which were passed overwhelmingly by the Samoans after the plebiscite. So there was certainly a lot of expectations from throughout the country. There were lots of, the church themselves sort of played a significant part insofar as having special services not only in town but throughout the country. And it was a lot of talk about independence.
So what did Molino look like on that day, particularly the Malama?
Well, what I, apart from the decorations which were went up around the old Parliament House, and flowers and garlands and things like that. What I remember most was just this march from this area of Songi towards Mulino. There were lots of what was referred in those days as whaleainga, the temporary shelters which were built by various business-minded people to sell ice cream and pies and drinks, and which were very welcome after the march and after the ceremonies, because on our way back, walking from Mulino back to town, it was hot, and so those whaleaingas, they were called, were sort of was hardly any. Was mostly done up with sticks and coconut fronds, coconut leaves, and apart from being very useful, they contributed to the whole kind of joyous atmosphere for that walk from town to Mulino.
So what was the highlight of the day for you, your best memories?
But for me personally, at the time, I can remember that it was basically a very joyous occasion for people. And lots of people from my village, for example, as it was the case of several other villages, the buses were full, I mean, from my village in Whanariri, it took about 4 hours to come into town, just one way. And then a lot of relatives staying in town with whichever relative they could find in town to, and then to sort of catch the bus to go back for another hour, another 4 hours. I mean, so it was kind of a very social, very celebratory mood. Yeah.
So what did being independent mean for you at the time, and has this perception changed over time?
My understanding, to be quite honest, at the time was quite superficial. Independence was basically an occasion to celebrate because the colonial administration had gone. The lowering of the New Zealand flag was quite memorable. To some people, quite emotional. And the raising of the Samoan flag, which of course was there before that. But other than that, I think my memory at the time was basically sort of, let's go and have a good time, regardless of really the spirit of the day. And we were just young kids at the time.
So in your opinion, what has independence meant for Samoa?
Oh, I think a lot. Samoa, of course, joined a list of countries who had recently become independent. Although it was the first country to become independent, but the anti-colonial move that was sort of spearheaded more or less by the establishment of the United Nations. And Samoa, in that respect, sort of joined the community of ex-colonies which have become independent. I think one of the things I remember at the time was that, it was all male. Members of Parliament, the heads of department, even the people who came from outside. If you look now, looking back at the photographs and some of the films which was taken at the time, it was predominantly a male show, put it that way.
So what do you see as the most significant developments of the last 50 years?
I think everybody would agree that huge progress has been made with education, the human resources of the country. You can see nowadays, of course, I mean, at the time of independence, most of the departments, if not all the departments, were headed by New Zealand officials. And of course, the training programs which operated since then have resulted. I mean, I think the localization process of those senior posts started around 10 years after independence, maybe some earlier.
Thank you, sir. And finally, what are your hopes for Samoa for the next 50 years?
Well, I think I hope that this kind of evolutionary process will continue. I think Samoa has adapted quite well to the changes. That's not to say that there are no problems with it, but I think if you take a long-term perspective of the last 50 years, I think several positive things have happened. So the trend is going upwards in terms of the positive things which have happened. And there are a few issues still to deal with. And I think I hope that our leaders are kept informed about the changes which are taking place, and that they will enact policies and strategies to deal with what is happening now, and also more importantly perhaps to foresee what is going to happen in the future and react accordingly.